Welcome to the Pot.Live podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G. This podcast is all about connecting the community with the thought leaders of business and entertainment in the cannabis industry. As this industry expands and becomes more and more mainstream, we want to educate and entertain our listeners and become your choice and voice for all things cannabis. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. Listeners, are you looking for the only one-stop online platform in the cannabis industry? Then you have to check out MJ.com. MJ has it all. Medical and professional news and trends. Get your medical card. Over 150 free workouts for your health and fitness. VIP membership. 2 different gaming apps to win cash and prizes. Find your local dispensaries. Learn about the latest strains and search for your career in the marijuana industry. And don't forget to get your favorite lab-tested CBD products delivered straight to your front door. It's all at MJ.com. Welcome to the Pot.Live podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G, and today we have a special guest, Miss JiNan Glasgow George. She is a patent attorney and IP authority, a former U.S. Patent and Trademark Office patent examiner and engineer turned entrepreneur. And she recently launched the Magic Number patent forecast software, which we're going to dive into. JiNan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you.
Excellent. So I'm not going to do it justice, that's for sure. So why don't you give a little background on who you are and what you're doing right now, and then we'll dive into each aspect.
Oh, great. Thank you. And thanks for having me join your program. So as you mentioned, I'm a recovered engineer. I worked in new product development and research and development for over 5 years and decided rather than just inventing products in one narrow sector, that I wanted to branch out. And so I went into patent law from there. And I launched a practice and sold my first practice, launched a software company. And now I both practice IP law in a firm, Neo IP, in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, and recently launched Magic Number almost 2 years ago. Magic Number is a software company. So we look at investment in technology areas, everything from cannabis and biotechnology and medical devices all the way to high tech and software, kind of everything in between. The reason we look at patent data with Magic Number software is that you always have to invest in patent data before you can ever have commercial market activity. So it's a leading indicator of cutting edge trends, areas of opportunity for buying companies if you're into mergers and acquisitions, or areas of investing as well. So it gives us vision before most other investors or investment funds, and we bridge that patent data with market data. One of the areas that we've looked at a lot and that's had a lot of activity is the cannabis and hemp sector.
Great. So let's give a little background. So I know that as far as patent filings and your background with that, obviously it took 100 years to get the first million patents. And then in the last few years, that has accelerated quite a bit. Can you just talk about that trend over time?
Oh, sure. Well, the reason that we have the patent system and that people bother to participate in it, there's a lot of value in having exclusive rights. Everybody would love to have a monopoly if we could, right? But since monopolies straight out aren't legal, the best that you can hope for is by innovating and creating something new that we have never seen before, or an improvement that's really valuable. If you can have patent rights, then you can enjoy exclusive market activity in the US, for example, or in other countries. The US happens to be such an amazing market for every type of business that our patent system has continued to thrive and robustly receive new applications every year. There's about 500,000 new patent filings in the US every single year. So there's over 10 million issued patents. And again, that's just increasing year in, year out. Some sectors are hotter than others. That is, there's more new filings and more investment. And that usually corresponds to innovation, to pivot, to growth, and to new technologies, as well as new consumer and business appetite for products and services in those sectors. So patents are here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going anywhere. So for the newbies out there and or the business owners, can you talk about the difference between the value of having just a trademark on what you may have versus having that IP and a patent possibly attached to it?
Sure. They're so completely different. Both have exclusive rights. That is, you get to keep others out of your space. But what defines that space? So for a patent, the space is defined by the innovation, by the invention. Every invention is a solution to a problem, right? So the patents are really about functional solutions. And regardless of the length of time that you've been in a business, the patent can be very valuable, especially if there's lots of competition. The larger the company is, the more they can enjoy the return on investment in patents. So that's why large companies buy smaller companies, because if the small companies have patents and innovation, the large company can take advantage of that, leverage it, if you will, a lot more than the smaller company can, because they have more resources, they have more sales, they have more distribution, they have more customers. So, kind of spreading that exclusivity more broadly brings greater return. By contrast, trademarks are all about the brand. They're all about how well recognized your source is. Trademarks provide exclusive rights for a symbol connected with some kind of goods or service, the stuff, if you will. And it has to be something also that is actually being used in commerce. Patents, you can have a patent and keep others out, but you don't have to make or do anything. Trademarks, you have to be making and selling a product or service to enjoy exclusive rights. The trademark, in a way, is protecting the user, the consumer, because they'll know the source of the goods is your company. So they can expect a certain quality. They can expect consistency if that's what you deliver. Whenever you hear about intellectual property theft, for example, by companies from China or something like that, importing counterfeit goods, they're very often violating the trademark or the brand, right? They're trying to knock off the source, not necessarily the patent. But sometimes the patents can be infringed or violated, and it's just some generic brand put on it. When you couple patent rights and trademark rights together, that's real power, right? That's why larger companies invest so much in both patents and in trademarks. So if you're a smaller company, if you're newer in a market, consider marking out your territory both by patents and by trademarks to have a winning combination.
Okay, so basically that's perfectly explained. Thank you. So a patent, you can kind of leave dormant and just own that asset, if you will, and leave it there whether you're using it or not. A trademark has to be an actively used trademark, and a trademark can be challenged where a patent cannot. Is that correct?
Actually, they can both be challenged. It's a lot more difficult and more expensive to challenge a patent. As soon as you have a patent that issues, it's presumed valid. So whoever wants to challenge it has to overcome that hurdle, that bar, that presumption of validity. Trademarks are less expensive to obtain, and they can be easier to challenge. You can actually challenge a trademark before it issues, but you can't really do that effectively with patents. The patent office really makes all of those decisions. You can submit some information, but the patent examiner doesn't have to consider it. The trademark office actually publishes your application for a mark and allows people, invites people even to oppose it before they determine that they will allow it. So it's a very different process, and it's a lot easier and less expensive to challenge a trademark than it is a patent.
Great. Okay, so now tell us, let's go back a little bit. Obviously, you've been a patent attorney. What made you want to get into the cannabis and hemp field or niche of the industry?
Yeah, great question. One of the reasons that cannabis caught our attention is that it's now legally being used to treat a wide variety of medical conditions, right? From drug addiction to anxiety and nausea and even epilepsy. So it's become a forefront context, something that there's a lot of media on, there's a lot of press on. But what really got our interest was the amount of investment in the patent area in particular, which again, it's an indicator of investment by companies large and small. Growth in this area in the last 5 years has been over 300%. And that's just in patent filings. So the investment growth in this area has just been enormous. So whenever we see high growth, high activity, we think innovation. There was recently an industry outlook report that was summarized in Forbes, and that report predicted that legal sales would reach nearly $30 billion by 2025. That's incredible considering that it previously was not legal in any way, shape, or form in the U.S. and that, most states still consider marijuana to be illegal. But the cannabis, the CBD, and just the creative ways that companies are investing in it and growing, managing, and using CBD and cannabis and even hemp it's been amazing. There's a lot of activity. So that's what caught our attention. And we wanted to see below the surface, who's investing, how long have they investing, what's the area that they've staked out. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So now you referenced Magic Number earlier. You recently launched Magic Number, which is a patent forecast software. Can you tell our listeners, first of all, where they can find more information about that? And number two, details of really what it is and who it's for and who it helps.
Yeah, thanks. You can find information online on our website, which is magicnumberip.com. And the patent forecast is really for anybody who's investing or who owns a business and competes in this area. So there's patent information and there's market information. Again, the patent information, it tells you where the investment has happened before it hits the market. It tells you where assets are, which companies have the rights to exclude or keep others out. And it also identifies companies that might be attractive acquisitions in the future. So smaller companies that are innovating and obtaining these exclusive rights will be attractive acquisitions. If you also just want to look at trends, you're thinking of starting up a company or investing in a company in this area, you can decide what area best suits you and your interests, what has the most opportunity, from compounds or compositions to cultivation, devices like vaping or transdermal, ways of delivering the substances, food and beverage and supplements is a very active area, medical, and then just processing. These are all very different areas with different companies investing in them. And the Magic Number patent forecast visually explains that in a super easy way that anybody can understand and access. Patents are really tedious documents to read. You almost have to have like a great persistence and perseverance. You have to want to find all the information in them. But on the other hand, they're rich sources of information about not just what companies are active, but as individuals, who's innovating and who's inventing in the area. We also look at news and insights on Magic Number with our software. We're kind of bridging market data with this patent information. So some of the news and insights that you can see, for example, even in the last week, is that Bridgestone, right, they make tires, they are doing a hemp oil containing rubber that's claimed to help prevent tears. We're sort of referring to it affectionately as pot wheels. But also, there's another company that recently popped on our radar that has just received their 5th patent in substance detection. They just raised $30 million in funding, and it's a company that makes breathalyzers, if you will, impairment detection devices. And the team includes a physician, a former venture capitalist, and a reserve deputy sheriff, and a patent attorney. That's an interesting combination of people in a company. So we're looking at this business activity every week as well as patent activity. And that's what Magic Number and Patent Forecast is about. It's about helping you see and helping to predict the trends, what's coming next.
Well, that sounds like a hugely valuable tool, especially for business owners or people in acquisition mode, like you said. That's great. Okay, I wanted to jump back to, once again, the value of having that IP, having a patent. I think a lot of people don't understand that, big banks actually hold patents in different industries. Like I believe there are some big banks that own all the patents in cryptocurrency. There are pharmaceutical companies that own cannabis patents. Can you just talk about how people don't realize that all of these big companies are positioning themselves with these patents or IP assets to jump into the next emerging market, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the number one way to get value out of patents or get a return on investment of patents, they're expensive to create. You really need a patent attorney to work that for you. And even just to file, it can cost $10,000 to $15,000 for filing a patent. So you have to know, how are you going to use that as an asset in your business? Even as an individual, if you're thinking about licensing or selling, you've got to really have a business plan to make that work. That being said, they're super valuable because you can keep companies and people out of the territory of the product or service that's covered by the claims of the patent. And that's why companies, large and small, invest in patents and these exclusive rights. The interesting thing is that most of the time, people think having a patent, or small companies and individuals in particular, think it's like a lottery ticket that's winning, right? You have a patent, it's worth $1 million. Not at all. The number one way to get a return on investment is to have a business that enjoys the exclusivity so that you're growing your market, you can have premium pricing, you don't have to really worry about competition as long as you have this patent that's issued that has claims that have a good scope. Large companies do it, as I said before, because the more they can keep their competitors out, the more profit they make, the more return that they get on the investment in every patent. That's why they often look at patent position when they're targeting companies to buy. So think about, like, Google bought Motorola Mobility for over $11 billion a few years ago, and they really did it for the patents, right? They sold off the operating business to enjoy the exclusive rights of the patents because they were late to the game in the smartphone area. So they had to buy. They didn't have enough time to build. When we look at emerging markets like cannabis, we see pharmaceutical companies have been investing over time more consistently than anyone else because it takes a long time to go through FDA approval. And GW Pharmaceuticals, which is a UK-based company, they're the largest patent owner and patent filer in the cannabis patent forecast sector in the US. But right behind GW Pharma in this sector is individual inventors. That is, the number 2 patent owner and patent filer in this area comes from individuals. And that's pretty amazing. That means this is moving so quickly that people are filing even before companies get started. The number 3 position in this sector right now is a company called Lunatech. And it appears that they don't actually make and sell anything. Remember, you don't have to with patents. They are just filing these patent assets, creating assets to keep others out of, mostly it's in the vaping, the device space for cannabis. They're planning to probably enforce those patents as soon as the market grows big enough and other companies are in the area. We all know vaping's recently had a setback because of safety and health issues. But at the same time, you see that this is high risk, but maybe a high return investment for those people. Sometimes they're affectionately known as patent trolls because they don't make or do anything. But the fact is, they have exclusive rights in this area that they've been investing in. That is a business, right? Yeah. And then pharma continues to round things out. But we saw, a few other companies that are great targets for acquisition that have only been around for a few years. So patents can really make or break a company. If you don't have them, you need them. That's for sure. So take a look at what's there. The data is freely available from the patent office. The trouble, again, is it's a lot of material to read. It's hard to understand. So at Magic Number, we've tried to make it easy to see. When you look at another emerging area like cryptocurrency, and crypto and cannabis overlap a lot, right? There's a lot of companies that kind of have a crypto that's for the cannabis sector, in particular for making transactions easier. But as you mentioned, the number 1 patent investor, patent owner in cryptocurrency for a long time was Bank of America. But if you read their market positioning statements, their PR, they were sort of like, we're really concerned about cryptocurrency. It's not reliable. We're concerned about issues that of legality and regulation in the area. And yet all the while they've been investing because they can't afford not to have a position here. Otherwise, they would be blocked out and they'd have to buy. So this idea of thinking build versus buy it's never too early to start building. But if you're too late, you have no choice but to buy, because there's no second place in patents. You have to get there first. It's first to file.
And isn't there, I know we've heard stories or rumors that the US government actually has a bunch of patents in cannabis. So while they denounce it in a lot of ways, they also have a vested interest in it going legal. Is that correct?
Oh, that's a great question. The U.S. government actually does a lot of investment across areas because we have research labs, right? So our government is never not looking at an area. The NASA is often an arm of the government that has filings, that has applications. We know that NASA has at least one published pending application in the cannabis sector, and that the U.S. government, as represented by Health and Human Services, has at least one issued patent in the area as well. So that was an older patent related to cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. So it's more the research arms of our government that does investment rather than the regulatory or policy arms. So, our government is big and has many branches, many arms, and I think that makes a difference. Our view on that is that it's definitely more about research inquiry than managing exclusive rights through patents. They have a very small position compared to companies and individuals.
It's such an interesting dynamic because most people think if you invent something, you get the patent, but it's really not the first to invent. It's the first to apply that actually gets the patent, right? Is basically what you've touched on earlier. Is that correct?
It's definitely a race to file. I mean, think of the gold rush times, right? That's under the America Invents Act that went into full force in 2013. It changed the game. It used to be the first to invent, even if you filed second or third, as long as you were diligently reducing it to practice, you'd win probably in that area. But when the rules changed, that's when this patent data really kind of came more into the fore for us, because it requires you to file before you have commercial activity. You have to file before you have public use. There's not really a grace period in the same way that there used to be for that. In most other countries, that's always been true. So the U.S. kind of just harmonized a bit more with the rest of the world by making that change. But it was a big change because it does create this time pressure now that even if you came up with something, if it's an innovative area, if it's a hot investment area, if it's an active area where there's lots of customers and they want solutions to existing problems or situations, you can't wait. You have to file first. So it does put a little bit of a pinch on smaller companies to budget for that and to move on it. But the advantage for smaller companies over larger ones is that they move faster. So in that race to file, they often win.
Great. All right. So we usually finish up with, usually it's a CEO in the cannabis industry specifically. I usually ask them, give me something they're very excited about in the industry and something they're concerned about. But maybe for you, you're free to answer it in the cannabis industry if you'd like, but also maybe why don't you answer it in the patent industry? What excites you about what's going on with the current trends and what concerns you?
Sure. Well, the thing that excites me the most is about the continued pace of filing here, which means there's a lot of investment going into the sector. The thing that concerns me is that when you have an area that's not well established, or if you will, all the rules aren't settled for it yet, that it can create a lot of noise. There can be a lot of junky patents that get filed. So I imagine that that's the biggest concern for the area. There's going to be a lot of noise. There may be a lot more patent filings, but they will probably be lower quality. So we'll really have to sort through them to find the gems, to find the real value, to find the real treasure. So I think there's great opportunity, but because of the attention and the investment activity, there's going to be a lot more filings that aren't high quality. So that's the concern. But I think there's more opportunity here. The more that the industry gets established, the more that regulation settles down, I think that we'll see more business merger and acquisitions and continued investment, and hopefully really great solutions for people, right, for health and wellness, for pain alternatives, pain treatment alternatives, and perhaps even something fun here and there in food and beverages.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You've educated a lot of our listeners, including myself. So thank you very much about giving us all those explanations. JiNan Glasgow George, we will have all the show note information on Magic Number. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll see everybody next time on the Pot.Live podcast. Are you ready to be a VIP? Well, Culture Club is ready to bring you thousands of dollars in exclusive deals with the touch of a finger. Simply visit cultureclubusa.com, sign up, and you will get immediate access to dozens of CBD products, services, vacation rentals, over 1,800 vacation rentals, sports gear for all the top pro leagues, all of them, and educational courses. And check this out, a free $100 gift as soon as you sign up. Culture Club is basically paying you to become a member. It's a no-brainer. Go to cultureclubusa.com and become a VIP today.